So let's get started with the first member over here, first module, which is implementation of Azure Active Directory. And as part of this module, what we're going to discuss about is significance of Azure Active Directory, right? Custom domains, your identity protection, and finally, conditional access. Now, one of the advantages which I have is I also do trainings for AZ 104, 204, AZ 500, which is Azure Security. So most of these modules that we have over here overlaps with some of the existing components. So somebody who has worked with these modules may find these are overlapping modules to 104 or 204, but I would recommend we still do those implementations and go ahead with this. Practice more and more and take it as an independent entity. Okay. So as part of this module, the first one, we'll take a quick look into overview of Azure Active Directory, right? And some aspects of how do you manage this complete identity and identity solutions over here. Okay. So in terms of creation of users, groups, you're making sure how do you protect this environment using identity protection mechanism, conditional access, looking at some of the advanced aspects of multi-factor authentication for fraud alerts. Okay. So let's first get into Azure Active Directory. Now, before we begin our conversation over here, as far as Azure Active Directory is concerned, this is one of the services which is available on Azure platform, right? For accessing this, you need not have an Azure subscription. You can directly access these services, even if you have your Office 365 account or Microsoft Intune, or if you're using any such resources. Even in that context, there also you can make use of Azure Active Directory, because Azure Active Directory forms a foundation for storing or creation of any kind of identities that you have. Earlier, what we had was Active Directory as part of your Microsoft environment that we have, right? On-premises environment. People who have been working with Microsoft workloads, they will definitely be aware about Active Directory, though we don't get a luxury of provisioning this very often, because in the initial phases itself, it has been configured and configured by our admin team, and we just keep getting connected to it on a daily basis. Whereas once it comes to new workloads that you create and people who have been part of that environment creation, they would be actively involved in creating them. As far as developers are concerned, developers would be definitely connecting to this by using their code for OAuth tokens, SAML tokens, right? Kerberos-based tokens. So there will be more programmatic approach towards it, right? As far as Active Directory is concerned, there are number of components over here, which is directory services, right? Then you have Active Directory Federation services, right? Then you have your Active Directory certificate services, and you have your rights management services, right? Then you have your AD/LDS, which is Active Directory lightweight directory services. So these are some of the key services which is available as part of your on-premises environment. Along with this, what you also have is multi-factor authentication. Let me put it as multi-factor authentication server, and you also have a radius server. So these are set of services which are available within on-premises environment. So people have been installing it, configuring it for a pretty long time. Now what they want to do is they want to make it even better. And rather than asking the local infrastructure team or on-premises team to implement all these things, what if we can publish it as a service and make it available to different set of users? And that is what is called as Azure Active Directory. Okay. Is Azure Active Directory a replica of all these things, or does it contain all these features? Not necessary. So all aspects which is relevant for cloud environment or cloud-based identity services, all of these things are part of your Azure Active Directory. Okay. Just before I forget it, let me share these URLs with you all. So you can check for resources over here. So what is the course contents that we'll be covering in 2 weeks? What are the resources over here? These are Microsoft available details. People who are new to Azure or don't have too much of experience, right? My recommendation would be, can you see this learning paths over here, online free? So on a daily basis, whichever resources you all can you can cover. Right? So there are respective learning paths over here for people who are from a developer background, Java, .NET, doesn't matter. I would recommend please go through each of these members on a daily basis, depending upon whichever modules we are covering. So you'll have respective learning paths over here. And again, like I said, 2 hours within the session and after the session around 2 hours. So that 2 hours you all can revise whatever we have done, and also you all can start reading up on each of these areas. Right? You all can start reading up on each of the resources being given. It's really a great information. Microsoft has already created some of the very good scenarios over here. In sense, if this is an organization, these are the number of people, this is the kind of applications that they have, right? So this also helps you for the exam, because even in the exam you have a lot of scenario based questions, and all of these are overlapping or coming from these reading materials. Okay, so definitely go through these.
Reading materials or videos, Subhash?
I didn't get that part. Can you repeat that?
Reading material or videos?
It contains both of them. Maximum of them is reading material. Some of the modules also have the videos and the lab environment. The lab environment given over here will be on a timely basis, like 2 hours or 3 hours. Within that, you have to complete those steps, and once it is done, it will get removed. So those labs will get removed. It's like a sandbox environment. Are you getting it?
Yeah. So I understand the sandbox. Once you're done, it get deleted. So my question is that
Yes.
These the architect network infrastructure in Azure, so that
Correct.
all modules. So you can you open that part?
Okay.
Okay, you go step by step.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
No problem. So people who are from developer background, I would definitely recommend please read through this, because there are a lot of questions in the exam which are from networking perspective, right? Even if you don't have great amount of hands-on experience, right? But by reading this, by understanding it, you will be able to understand what are the scenarios, and in a given scenario, what would be the right kind of solutions that we can create. Some of these things which are possible within Azure, I will definitely show that. In sense, creation of VPN gateways or creation of site VNet peering. So those things I can show you. Things like on-premises connectivity that I will not be able to show you here. Okay, but those things I can read it from these learning paths. Let me move ahead. So I was discussing about Azure Active Directory and the core purpose of Azure Active Directory. Let's move ahead. If you look at your Azure Active Directory, as part of your Azure Active Directory, if you look at the resources over here, so on one side, you have your Windows Server Active Directory, which I was talking about, with the 5 components: ADDS, ADCS, ADLDS, ADRMS, and ADFS. There could be other directories as well, which will help you store the information or work with those resources. So this is something which is existing within your on-premises environment. On other side, and obviously along with this Azure Active Directory, along with your Active Directory, you have number of other applications or other exhaustive workloads like SQL Server, your SharePoint environment, your BizTalk, Exchange Server, correct? So every major workload that you see within Microsoft environment, all of them have deep interactivity or deep connectivity with your Windows Server. On other side that you see is lot of SaaS solutions, right? Every day developers are going ahead creating new kind of applications, new kind of resources for mobile applications targeting a specific business domain, right? And all these applications are getting hosted onto cloud or some other environment. Now the question over here is, when I have these applications created, when I have these resources created, and I want it to be used by millions of users, right? How do I work with it? Meanwhile, I also want to ensure that whatever services I'm creating, whatever resources I'm creating, that should be accessible to millions of people. How will that happen? Okay. Now, while I'm targeted towards millions of users, I would also want to have users who are registered to my environment, registered to my platform. Okay. How does that happen? So one way is I can create a database behind the scene, or where I can store all the registered users, right? I can work with them. That's one approach. Or I would just outsource this identity management service to somebody else, right? So if you look at Microsoft Azure Active Directory, this is basically an outsourced entity, right? So as far as this Active Directory is concerned, its primary responsibility is identity and access management for multiple solutions, right? So Azure Active Directory as an identity service can be used by Office 365, Microsoft Intune, right? Your other MDM solutions that you have in Microsoft, M365, O365, all of them are using Azure Active Directory, right? Any third-party applications, they can also go ahead and use Azure Active Directory, because they would want to focus, the developer team would not want to focus on the identity management. The focus would be on business logic. The focus would be on making sure the business logic is pretty effective. Whatever services is being given by that vendor, it is much more effective. And today, if you look at the users, they don't want to register onto every application. They say that if I already have an account on Google, if I already have an account on Twitter, I already have an account on some other environment. Why don't you allow me to log in through that? Why should I register all over again? Correct? And once I have registered myself over there, you can ask me for those permissions. You can ask me for those credentials and allow me accessing resources over here. Okay. Apart from this, self-service password reset, self-service addition of devices, right? Simplifying connectivity or synchronization between on-premises environment, having a single sign-on between number of applications. This is what users are asking for in terms of simplicity, in terms of effectiveness of using those resources over here. And that is what is being given to you by Azure Active Directory. Okay. So first thing that you'll see is it's a multi-tenant cloud-based directory and identity management service. Why am I stressing upon this word service time and again? Because this is platform as a service. You don't have to install or create any resources here. Okay, you don't have to create any virtual machine or create any such members which will help you access or create the users over here, right? That's the first and very important part. Second aspect over here, which I mentioned earlier, is single sign-on to number of cloud applications and resources. Third member that you see over here is your development of applications, and it can be accessed from anywhere in a secured manner. If you look at the features over here, you have large number of details that one can see. The only issue over here is if you want to use all these facilities, you'll have to use a right tier for your Azure Active Directory. Now, people who have worked with AZ 204, even they have worked with some aspect of Azure Active Directory, right? But most of our requirements get satisfied by using Azure Active Directory free. So if you want to go beyond that, if you want to use more facilities over here, you need to go ahead and choose the higher tiers like Premium P1, Premium P2. They will give you additional functionalities. Okay. Let's go to pricing section over here. Let me look at the identity service here, Azure Active Directory. Now here, you'll be able to see all the tiers, their respective pricing, and set of feature list. I'll keep putting these links on the chat window. My recommendation to all of you all would be copy this, put it onto OneNote or whichever single location you want for these members, so you can refer it in future. Okay. So if you look at your services over here or details of each of these tiers, whether it is free tier, premium P1, premium P2, the amount of features over here are identity access management for Office 365 apps. So if you look at password protection, group access management, self-service password reset, on-premises write back, your requirements in terms of hybrid identities, creation of dynamic groups, conditional access, all these. So if you look at privileged identity management, your conditional access policies, all these basically are part of your premium features. Okay. So depending upon, now again, as an architect, how does it make sense to me? So depending upon what is your customer's requirement, you need to select right kind of tier over here. And it need not be for every individual. It can be for specific team or a specific group within your organization. Okay. So I hope this makes sense for us. Let me proceed further. So if you look at the core entities within Azure Active Directory, you have your identity over here. How are you going to connect to that resource? Now, when I say a resource over here, every element that you see within Azure will be a resource. Whether you are looking at management groups, whether you are looking at public IP addresses, whether you are looking at web application or app service plan, each of these are your resources over here. Okay. Before we connect to any of these resources, you need to be an authenticated user. Right. Now, when I say authenticated user, the user over here could be your application as well. Right. So therefore, there is something called a service principal over here. So using service principal, you'll be connecting to your resources within Azure platform. Next member that you have is your account that you are creating, the user accounts. Then you have your Azure AD account through which you would have created your Azure Active Directory. Right. Now, by now everybody would be clear that Azure AD is not part of the Azure environment. Okay. Azure AD is an independent service given by Microsoft. It is not part of your Azure environment. When I say Azure environment, Azure gives you something called as infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. It gives you two sets of services. As far as Azure Active Directory is concerned, this is an independent service which can be used with Azure environment. It can be used with other members as well. Just to help you all understand it better, let me go to azure.com once again. And this time, let me take you to the marketing aspects over here. So I hope this image will help you understand it better. So if you see this image, this is what I was talking about. So Azure Active Directory is an independent service which behaves as identity management service for Azure as well. So when I say Azure, here I'm referring to infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. Whereas if you look at software as a service, this is also an identity solution for Office 365. It can behave as identity solutions for Google Apps, SAP, Canvas apps, right? Third-party apps, Workplace, Dropbox, and a lot of third-party custom applications that developers create. So what simply you have to say is, I will register my application on Azure Active Directory. Whatever users are connecting, that user information will be within Azure Active Directory. So any kind of registration or anything which has to be done, all that user management will be taken care by Azure Active Directory. Okay. Let's proceed further. So if somebody has already created a free trial account or you all are going to do that, that will be your Azure AD account. And your Azure AD account, you should make sure, right? Your Azure AD account, when you're creating, this will be within your specific domain that you have chosen. When you create your free subscription or free trial, you are creating your using your Hotmail ID, Live ID or Outlook ID. That is where your identity gets associated, right? Another member that you have once you create your free trial, right? What you'll see over here would be your Azure tenant, right? The directory that you are creating, right? Whatever name you may have given, that will behave as your directory. Now, once you create your Azure Active Directory over here, within your Azure Active Directory, your tenant will be associated, and this will be trusted Azure Active Directory. So tenant and Azure AD directory, these terms are used intermittently or interchangeably. Okay. The moment you create a new directory, you'll have a new tenant as well, right? Now, within one Active Directory, you can associate your Azure subscription and whatever services you have provisioned over there, or whatever is the type of subscription you are creating, you'll be able to use those services. So if you're creating a free trial subscription, like some of you all might have done with AWS, right? So depending upon type of subscription, you'll be able to use limited set of services within that. Now the limitation would be in terms of time, or limitation would be in terms of type of resources, right? Or if you go for a pay-as-you-go model, you can create any resource, and depending upon the consumption, you have to pay for it. Okay. You may have a EA subscription, enterprise agreement subscription, which large enterprises have. So there are different types of subscriptions that we have. Before I proceed further,
So yeah, account when I understood, and Microsoft AD account, and the tenant is the that's where you create your free account in the Azure portal, and Azure tenant has dedicated trusted to the last one, Azure AD directory, is the from the tenant to the connected to the different trusted devices. Then
right?
and used to pay for Azure cloud services. Basically, the subscription is like you're going to pay for all your microservices and other services.
Correct.
Pay as you go. Um, okay. I mean, you're going to create all your resources there. You pay for the
That's
resources.
correct. Unless you have a subscription, you will not be able to create any resource over here.
Yeah.
Okay. So here I was discussing about Azure Active Directory. So if you look at your Azure Active Directory, right? So the moment you create your free trial account, you'll get a license over here. You'll get a tenant ID. Whatever users or groups one might want to create, all these resources are available here. So even right now, before I proceed further, how many of you have a Azure subscription?
What is that, what?
How many of you have a Azure subscription, free trial account or any other subscription?
I do have.
I have created one as well.
Arjun has one, Chinna has another. Gopi, how about you?
Yeah, I have one.
Superb. Guru has one.
Yeah.
Gopi, how about you?
I don't have it.
Okay, so you'll have to create a free trial account.
Sure.
And using that free trial account, you will get a subscription.
Sure.
Okay. Now, why I'm insisting on having a free trial account or a subscription is, without that, you will not be able to do a hands-on. So please make sure you have your own subscription using free trial or any other mechanism that you would want. Let's proceed further. So let's go to the next one over here, which is Azure Adjoin. So along with your users that we create, we can also register our devices over here. Okay, so we can do a Azure Adjoin to your Windows 10 machine or any such devices that you have. So using MDM options or Microsoft Intune solutions, you can register your devices over here, right? So when you have registered your device, what you will do is you can get features of single sign-on. You can get features of latest resources of Windows 10, which is Windows Hello. You'll be able to access all the applications over here, and all these applications are working on single sign-on and they are compliant for roaming. That's an advantage that we get with Azure Adjoin. Even management of resources becomes much more easier once you have added your resources. So pushing any kind of patches is concerned, or any kind of system upgrades are concerned, all these things will become easier once you have registered your device over here. If you look at the types of devices, it's not just about Windows devices, even iOS, Android, Mac, even these kind of devices can be registered over here. Your Windows 10 Enterprise or any higher-end license that you have, even that can be associated. Only server core, which does not have a UI, or server core basically is the most minimal feature that you have for a server environment. So apart from that, all other virtual machines can be registered with your Azure Active Directory. So your on-premises hybrid solutions, if you want to create all these device registrations, that can be done with your Azure Active Directory. So even if you are a new organization, right? Even if you are setting up a new resource, you don't have to purchase or you don't have to create your on-premises Active Directory. You can directly start working with Azure Active Directory. Even if you have your existing Active Directory, existing on-premises Active Directory, you can do a hybrid setup over here for your resources. So some of these features, I don't have to repeat myself. I have already mentioned this within the services, right? In the pricing tier, what are the services available? And depending upon what is the feature that you want to explore, you can use this.
Quick question, Subhash. When will we be able to access this recordings? Can we access right away? We just want to go over.
Yes, you can.
We can access the recordings right away, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Just in case, like if we have to brush up.
No problem. So if you look at your device registrations, you can extend your on-premises Active Directory to cloud using Azure AD Connect. We can protect the sensitive information and applications. So before user gets access to any of the contents, the user has to make sure they go and register their device over here, right? And by doing that, they'll be able to perform relevant actions. So if you see the features over here on right-hand side, your Azure AD Connect, which is a service, which is a synchronization service from your on-premises to Azure platform, right? Your B2B collaboration, any kind of conditional access that one would want to implement. In terms of your Azure AD Connect, how many users have been synchronized correctly? If there are any issues in terms of synchronization, any AD properties that have not been synchronized, right? So those things you can check as part of your Connect Health. In terms of multi-factor authentication, I'll come to that separately. And you must have been seeing OTP-based authentication or phone-based authentication. All these are part of your multi-factor authentication, right? Similar to your Active Directory domain services, you also have Azure Active Directory domain services, right? It does not give you all the required features, but it provides simplicity in terms of working with your working with specialized workloads like SharePoint, SQL Server. So those servers, what you can do is you can associate them with Azure Active Directory domain services. Okay, so you can also use something called as Authenticator app over here. So there are quite a few features that you have as part of your Azure Active Directory. Right. So this was generic information in terms of what is the significance of Azure Active Directory, what are the features over here. Let's now get deeper into each of these areas, start looking at some of the specific implementations in this environment.
Hey, Subhash, can you go back to the previous slide?
Yep.
So these are all under Azure AD, right? Azure AD.
Yes.
Okay. And these are all the, can we call them as a microservices under Azure AD or services provided by the AD? If you see all this authenticator, ADS, and Azure AD Join, all are under these are all services come under Azure AD, correct?
That's right.
So
Microservices could be
can we call them as sub-services?
You can call them as sub-services, or you should generally how Microsoft refers it as is Microsoft refers it as features. These are features of
features. Okay.
These are features of your environment.
So I have one more question here. So I was reading about previously AD join in the register. Can you just add a few lines on that part? Join and register.
So whenever you have number of devices over here, you'd want to add your device in the given environment, right? So as far as device is concerned, that device has to be registered on this environment. Say for example, if there is a new person who has joined the organization, right? How would they go ahead and start accessing the resources?
Okay, basically, right? Devices are registered, correct?
Yes.
And accounts are joined.
Yes, that is what is. So if you look at your laptops or desktop machines that you have, you'll do a AD join for that. Whereas devices that you have, your front handheld devices or tabs that you have, those devices you can add within the within the Azure Active Directory.
They are registered.
If you look at your on-premise.
Yeah, you go ahead.
So this is something that we have been doing. Yeah, this is something that we have been doing within on-premises Active Directory. Now all these things will be done with Azure Active Directory.
Subhash, I have a question. So,
please go ahead.
I just want to, imagine the same thing using a live scenario. For example, let's say Google here. So suppose they are using this feature, and so using these services of Azure AD, they use all the AD join and everything, and they try to create. So whoever the developers who are on or architect who is on Google's team, they do this, right? It's not like they request the Azure AD, or Azure people or anything like that. It's they personally create all these things.
How to explain this?
I know the may be dumb,
so
but
once it comes to so once it comes to your applications have to be registered on that directory. Say for example, your services may be running on Google environment, but their identity management will be done by Azure Active Directory, which means that Google application has to be registered on Azure Active Directory.
Okay.
The compute environment will be Google GCP environment, but that identity and access management will be taken care by Azure Active Directory. Even vice versa is true. So your application may be hosted on the Azure platform, but its identity can be taken care by Azure. So if you go and register your web application, right, there you have an option whether how do you want to authenticate this user. So you want to use Google authentication, you want to use Facebook authentication, you want to use Microsoft account over here. That authentication mechanism you have to mention.
Like we use Google for other applications. Google.
That's right. Same way. So when you launch that application, launch the website, it says, tell me how do you want to authenticate it, or who's the authentication service provider, or who is the identity service provider. So identity service provider is in this context is Azure Active Directory.
Like you can use your Google account to connect to Dropbox.
Yes, that's right.
Right. Got it. Thank you.
Okay.